All right, guys, welcome to the video. John Bodine here with Redemptive Psych. Today I'm joined with Solomon. He has his own channel over at Solomon the Surmounter. He talks about personality psychology, some people's types, and a lot of other stuff. He has a model that he derived from some socionics principles. He can fill in some of the other details that he's going to present today, and we're going to discuss it. I know a little bit about it. He shared some in previous conversations, and I think it's really interesting and worth talking about. So, Solomon, thanks for being here. Welcome in. And is there anything else you want to add before digging in?
No, man. I just want to say thanks for having me.
Of
And yeah,
course.
we'll answer some of the questions along the way, but we can just jump right into it.
Sounds good. So take it away. We can chat about it.
All right. So this system is called Socionics Model S. It's a combination of socionics and applied psychology. So let's talk about what is Socionics Model S and how is it different from other systems out there. Model S is a scientifically informed typology system focused on how mental energy is structured, used, and developed. It maps cognitive roles and energy states that explain why people feel confident, stuck, motivated, or drained. It's built on Jungian foundations and applied peer-reviewed psychological principles and operational roles that you can actually use. It turns theory into something that you can not only apply but practice day in and day out. It shows where your strengths actually come from, where your energy leaks, and what growth will give you the highest return. It's not about who you are, but it's about how you evolve. Now, the reason why this system was created is because there was a problem in the typology community that I've noticed after being involved in personality typology for about 7 years now. Most typology systems are not built on science. They rely mostly entirely on qualitative descriptions. They offer little to no quantification and lack any sort of empirical grounding. As a result, they produce endless arguments over definition instead of tools that can be applied. Even when people attempt to use typology practically, they often do so without a working understanding of the core psychological principles. So, rather than debating labels, Model S operationalizes cognition, energy, and development. The result is a system that bridges both the theory, structure, and the scientific application, designed not to categorize people only, but to also guide them to measurable and strategic self-development. The promise is that Model S won't just tell you who you are, but it gives you a guided exercise you can practice to develop who you are that you can objectively measure. All right, so that's just like the quick overall of what this system is before going into like the key concepts or anything like that. So
Let me jump in real quick. So the idea is to, as I hear it, it's to get away from just merely interpretive psychology and um, you know, getting away from developmental ideas that are very theoretical but not practical. Can you speak a little bit to what makes it more grounded, what makes it more valid, basically, from empirical
yeah,
side?
so there's a lot of talk. People like to talk and chit chat about terms and definitions and argue and debate. Now, in Model S, I try to give people like practical like exercises that they can do at home,
Okay.
like actual exercises they can do in and day out at home every single day to improve themselves. It's basically providing targeted practices, and the targeted practices, the the how could I explain? The prescription for them is backed by science, by the academically peer-reviewed research papers. I wanted to give something that's practical, but without compromising the TI logic as well. I wanted to make this both a TI and a TE system
Okay.
combined together into one.
Okay. Fair.
So
Cool.
yeah, so let's get to the key concepts of sociotic of Model S. Now here are the key concepts that are crucial. The first one is called ascension, which is basically this is the central purpose of the entire system. This part is more of a moral imperative as opposed to necessarily a logical or rigorous theory. It's more of like, okay, this is what should be done, which is that growing and improving yourself is all about moving from your weakest, most vulnerable mental states up to your strongest, most confident states. It's the main goal of the entire system. The second concept that we got is called consciousness. Now, this is the part of your mind that you're actively aware of. And in this system, you're going to be aware of, at a base minimum, of two different cognitive roles. I'll get to what cognitive roles is in a little while. But then we got blocks. A block is basically a group of two mental roles that show different levels of energy, from weak and draining, which is the abyss, to strong and empowering. They're like floors in the mental building. Later in the presentation, I'm going to show you the diagram of Model S, so you'll be able to actually visually see the blocks themselves. Then we got the cognitive functions. I think this one we all know by now what those are. It's the tools that your mind uses to understand the world, make decisions, and act. Now, these fill the roles and how the roles are fulfilled. Now, let's talk about a cognitive role. A cognitive role is just another name for a cognitive slot. So, if you're from the John Beebe system, it's just another way of saying cognitive function slot. But a cognitive role exists within the block, and it's where the cognitive functions slot in, shaping how you act, react, and make decisions. And each role has a specific purpose. Then, last but not least, we got the mental modes. Now, this is a little bit more advanced and slightly more speculative, but it's how your mind works when two roles team up either temporarily to solve a problem or habitually as your normal way of thinking. Mental modes is all about mapping and tracking the state of mind that you're in. And in total, there are 12 different mental modes. All right. So let me go on to the next part. Now, this is going to be the most important part, I guess, of the whole presentation, which is the model diagram. The most important part is the part in the middle that you see here. And each block, cognitive block, is arranged in rows. So we got the ego block, the catalyst block, the shadow block, and the abyss block. All right. Now each row, each block has two rows, which are function slots, and they're arranged from bottom to up. And the whole idea is that we want to move from the abyss block, the lower states, to the higher states through the concept, the imperative of ascension. All right. So if you got any questions, just let me know.
Yeah. So to jump in real quick.
Yeah.
So the two rows in the middle, are these other words for the functions? Like, is the leading role the hero? Is the supportive role the parent? So on and so forth.
Yes.
Okay. So the idea is, okay, and then it's child, inferior, nemesis, critic, and demon, trickster, all the way down.
Yeah.
In the blocks. Okay. So the idea is, one of the ideas is that you can only really use one of these blocks at a time. Is that accurate?
It's two rows minimum. Like some people can use more, some people less, but it's at the very minimum two.
Okay. Interesting.
So, and it's basically like a map of where your mental energy is at. So if you're somebody who is occupying like a shadow block or an abyss block, and that's where most of your energy is spent, you're going to experience more negative states. And then as you go up, there's more positive states. There's also a set of values. So, for example, the ego block, the leading role, and the supportive role. These are your most valued and strongest cognitive roles. Then you got the catalyst block, which is the ignition role and the apprentice. These are weak, but they're valued. But then when you go to the shadow block, you'll notice that the challenger role and the sentinel role are strong but devalued. So the top half are the things that you value. The bottom half are the things that you don't value, and those determine your quadrants as well. It later connects to quadrants down the line.
Okay, so it's like there's another invisible layer here of the things the things that we're good at and that we value are hero and parent.
Yeah.
The things that we're good at, but the things that we value but we're not as strong at are the child, inferior. Yeah. What we are good at but don't value are the nemesis and the critic. And what we're bad at and we don't value is the demon and the trickster.
Yeah.
Okay. So the most interesting point here is the claim that the nemesis and critic are actually stronger than the child and the inferior and more capable with whatever information is at their disposal.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Okay.
All right. So now let's move on to the next. Now we're gonna go to each one as like specific. We're gonna zoom in a little bit. So let's start off with the ego block, right? That's the leading and the supportive role. So what is the ego block? What happens when we pair them together? Because the thing about Model S is that we really like to look at what happens when two different cognitive roles pair together and how that influences the overall behavior and
Okay.
development of a person. The ego block represents the peak of your personal power and self-expression. This is where you operate from your strongest and most valued aspects, the mental state that energizes you, gives you confidence, and allows you to make meaningful impact in life. When you're functioning in this block, you feel alive, capable, and aligned with your identity. This is the space needed to create momentum, overcome obstacles, and define your life on your own terms rather than being swept along by external pressures or internal doubts. The function of the ego block as a whole for your personal self development is to help you recognize your core strengths and leverage them consistently, build resilience, confidence so that challenges feel manageable rather than overwhelming, and it serves as a stable anchor when navigating weaker or more reactive states in other roles. So you can use the ego block to also develop the other blocks as well, or when you're in a state of like, if you're stuck in an abyss block or a shadow block, you can use the catalyst or your ego
Mhm.
block to basically climb out of the lower states.
It's
So
basically saying that the hero parent is uh, our home base. It's our HQ. It's where all of our empowering energy comes from, and that if we can operate from there, then
yeah,
development of other blocks becomes much more likely.
yes.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to each one specific. Let's talk about the leading and the supportive role. Now, here is where some things got to pay attention to, which is for each cognitive role, the most important thing is the psychological concepts that it supplies you. So, for example, the leading role is responsible for your sense of self efficacy, resilience, and identity formation. It is the most important cognitive role for forming your identity. It's how people develop resilience, and it's the one that you're the most confident in naturally, of course. To understand the nature of the leading role, we have two dichotomies that we look at, which is bold versus cautious and inert versus flexible. Now, when it comes to the leading role, it is bold and it's inert. Now, what that basically means is that it's in your face, it's visible. That's why it's bold. It's inert, as in it's stubborn, not flexible, and it's trying to seek to conform the environment to it rather than conform to the environment.
Yeah.
It's the area of your greatest strength and the source of confidence and central to your identity. The purpose of it is to provide you with inner power, confidence, resilience for facing life's challenges and shaping the world. It's always active, it's resistant to external influence, it's self sustaining, and seeks to shape the environment. So that's the attitude and the nature of the leading role. When we take a look at the supportive, by contrast, it is responsible for supplying self-regulation. It's how you as an individual regulate yourself, and it's also how you socially integrate as a human. So let's take a look at the dichotomies. It is cautious and flexible. Cautious basically means that it's subtle and situationally used based on the context. So the supportive role is not always on. It's not always active. Sometimes it can be switched off, but
Mhm.
when it does get switched on, it's only getting switched on in specific contexts and areas. It's also flexible. It fluidly adapts. It influences the environment. So it adapts to the environment, but it can also influence the environment as well. It's the area of collaboration, discipline, and social function. The purpose is to provide self-regulation and integration with society, and it complements the leading role by enabling interaction and cooperation. It requires energy to use and is context dependent, open to influence from the environment, strong but secondary, and it activates to serve the leading or support other people. You're going to already see a lot of similarities and parallels between the John Beebe system, but Where I think Model S differs is the fact that the psychological concepts that are supplied to each cognitive role. So, for example, John, you're an INFJ. Your pathway to becoming to self-regulating better, to integrate
Hmm.
socially, would be to deploy extroverted feeling and to engage in FE-related activities. See what I'm saying?
Yes. So a couple things here. The first thing that comes to my mind is just the masculine feminine dichotomy. Whatever masculine energy is, it seems to be displayed more in the leading role in the quote unquote hero, and the parent seems to take on the complementary opposite of that of uh, well, like you say, more adaptable, more cautious, more of that. It feels more of that feminine energy. My one of my questions is, does this, if you agree with this pattern, does it follow all the way down? In each block, is there, kind of a yin and a yang relative to each other?
Yeah, for each block, there is going to be one that is stubborn
Okay.
and another one that is flexible, one that
Okay.
is bold, one that is control.
Okay. Um, Interesting. So my my next question is, with the parent or the supportive role being a source of regulation, I can see in myself how engaging socially is definitely regulating and kind of being in a position where I can employ FE. Though I'm wondering, is it because using the parent makes my inferior more calm and willing to engage, or is it, do you think the parent in of itself just creates that regulation, kind of separate from how it influences other functions?
So the supportive role regulates your leading, it regulates your ignition, and it can also support your apprentice, which in John Weeby terms is called the inferior. It doesn't it regulates the entire psyche as a whole.
Okay. So my impression as you say that is the parent helps restrain and guide the hero, and through that relationship, everything else can fall into place. So what I may be experiencing with the inferior being calmer when my parent's active, it sounds like you're saying that may come from the fact that the hero is more put into its place as well.
Now, what I'm saying is that the supportive role may make your inferior calmer. It can help
Directly.
your apprentice, yeah, directly.
Okay.
But it can also directly go to your leading. It can also be directly applied to your ignition.
Okay.
It is where you choose to direct it is really up to you,
Okay.
and where you need to do it the most. So that's kind of, yeah. You can even direct it outwardly towards others, like helping other people self-regulate. For example,
Sure.
like if I'm since I'm TE supportive, and if somebody comes up to me and asks me for help, I can help them regulate their day-to-day behavior by telling them to follow a certain TE plan
Sure.
or
Sure.
schedule.
This is interesting because I've made the argument in the past that the parent or the supportive role is the most influential in the psyche for the sake of allowing and enabling the regulation and the growth. Would you agree with that, or would you point something out?
Allowing and enabling. So I would say that it is definitely a growth area
Okay.
because of its flexibility. It's inherently more willing to listen to what the input of other people as well
Sure.
in that regard. I would say though the most crucial cognitive roles for your self development will always be the leading, and it will be the apprentice, because it was John Beebe and also Jung himself that said that the leading and the apprentice, and now in their term, hero and inferior, serve as the base of the psyche.
Okay.
Like the core of who you are is going to be your
All right.
leading apprentice.
Okay.
You know, and so it's true.
I would agree with that it's how we identify ourselves are often the hero and the inferior. For me, when about the parent role, I see it as the supportive role. um, maybe not directly the most important, but I think without it, those other things don't work. It's kind of like I don't know. The image that's coming to mind is having like a tank, but without those tire things where it doesn't, it can't move. It's not fluid. There's too much friction without the parent there to provide a buffer. Basically,
No,
is
so
how I
okay.
see it.
So I'd say this. So if we're talking about getting a push, getting things moving, the supportive role would not be responsible for that.
Okay.
The supportive role does not push. The supportive role is an anchor
Okay.
when you're pushing too much with your leading and ignition, or with right.
Right.
It's the more bold and like it's the more bold and inert
Yeah.
cognitive roles that are going to be the ones that are going to need to be a little bit tamed down,
Yeah.
you know.
Makes
And the
sense.
taming gets done by the supportive role.
Okay. Fair.
So let me move now to the catalyst block.
Fair.
The catalyst block represents the area of growth, inspiration, and momentum. It's not stable or self-sustaining as the ego, but it's crucial for self-development because it propels you forward when life feels stagnant and opens the doors to learning and new possibilities. Here, energy feels more playful, joyful, experimental, and vulnerable, sometimes bright and exciting, other times uncertain or easily exhausted. Now, why does this matter? This block is where you experience the spark of motivation and the hunger for growth. It's not about being perfect or fully competent, but about being open to renewal, influence, and the chance to become more.
Mm.
By engaging the catalyst block, you reignite your drive, discover new capacities, and accelerate self development. Let's take a look at the function for self development. The catalyst block is the bridge between weakness and strength. It transforms areas of vulnerability into sources of inspiration and growth by providing bursts of motivation when your leading energy feels depleted, making you receptive to guidance, feedback, and new ideas that stretch you. That's especially going to be the case for the apprentice role. Now,
Mhm.
in Model S, the cognitive role with the highest ROI for self development is going to be the apprentice role because it's as valued as your leading, but it's your weakest. So
Mhm.
naturally, it's the area that you want to improve in the most.
Okay.
So now let's just take a look at the ignition role. Any questions before I talk about this?
Yeah, just a reaction. It makes sense that the child in the inferior would be the hub for um, what might create a motivation to change or to chase dreams, particularly if we're already somewhat competent with our hero and parent, which I think we are. It's not as exciting. There's not as much of a story there as developing those lower functions. And I can think back in my own life of getting really into basketball starting in elementary school, and it became like my single focus for about 10 years through most of high school. Um, Seeing how that developed into obviously my performance, my ability to engage in the environment, to solve problems in the sport field, and just also how I reset. You know, I like playing video games. I like playing competitive games to help me, and it helps me release some of that energy and still develop some of that sensing ability. So for me, I would say it's also a restorative thing, which I think you implied that because it's the playfulness, it it provides that excitement and that replenishment, which I think you use that word too. So I can see that energy is so present in my own life, obviously in my past, but also day to day as well.
Yeah, yeah. Because it's the catalyst is valued, highly valued, as much
Right.
as your ego block, but it's just like an area of weakness. So of course, when you get the opportunity to improve on something that you're good at, I mean something that you value but you're not so good at,
Right.
you're going to experience a lot of positive emotions with
Right.
that. It's going to be an area of optimism in general.
Right. There is the most growth, the most excitement to be had, I think, from developing that block.
Yeah, for sure. But it's not easy. It's hard, but it's definitely the most rewarding person for every individual. So let me break down the ignition role now. The ignition role, which is in John Beebe's terms called the child role, supplies the mind with positive affect and intrinsic motivation. Like this right here is a place of positive emotions, and it's a thing that people are just naturally inclined to do without external influence or support. Now, if we talk about the nature of it, the dichotomies, it is bold, so it's going to be visible and in your face. It's inert, stubborn, and not flexible, seeks to conform the environment to it and not conform to the environment. See, it's the same as the leading function, if you've noticed. It's got the same dichotomies, the same sort of idea. It's like a mini version of the leading, basically.
Hmm.
It's a great way to look at it. It's the area of joy and energy burst. The purpose of this is to provide positive emotions and psychological restoration. It's not always active, but it glows bright when triggered, providing bursts of energy, inspiration, and renewal that reignites the leading goal and reawakens one's drive, and stress relief for the ego. So, if you're like, for example, a hypothetical would be if you're like in a state, so you're going through something, whatever that might happen to be, and circumstances don't allow you to stay in your ego block as much as you'd
Hmm.
like to. So it pushes you down into your shadow or your abyss. The ignition role is a great way to like get that initial spark. You know,
Hmm.
I had originally called the ignition role the spark role, but I wanted to change it to ignition. But it's basically like the ignition of a car engine.
Hmm.
In Model S, it's like there are tactics and strategies for developing yourself, but also to ascend with the
Yeah.
concept of ascension, which is going from one block, the bottom floor, to the top one.
Okay. Interesting.
So now let's go to the apprentice role. Now, the psychological concepts that it supplies is receptivity to feedback and social learning theory. Now, the reason why the supportive role is also receptive to feedback, but the apprentice role is the one that's most receptive to feedback.
Hmm.
Unlike the supportive role, it is valued as much as your leading. It serves as the base of your psyche. So
Hmm.
for NI DOMs, that would be SC, inferior.
Hmm.
For TI DOMs, that would be FE, inferior. It's cautious, subtle, situationally used based on context, flexible, as in it fluidly adapts and influences the environment. It's open to being influenced by others. This is actually an area where people seek out help in. So
Hmm.
people want to be helped in their apprentice role more than anything. If I had to draw like a distinction between the ignition and the apprentice role, you can check this is that the ignition role, people are defensive. They don't like being criticized for it. But the apprentice role, they're a lot more open to criticism in that
Hmm.
area because they
Interesting.
want to get. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
Just
yeah.
real quick about the most interesting thing I think here is on the apprentice role is the receptivity to feedback, which is I think that's true, and I think people if you criticize the inferior in the right way, like particularly giving it constructive things of how it can grow and improve, um, up to a certain point is very receptive to that. I found for myself that too much criticism or feedback is like it's too much to process for the inferior. But if it's like a couple specific things at a time, you can definitely be receptive to it. But the receptivity itself is very interesting. Like, why is it more receptive? And I feel like it's because the inferior is more unsure of itself. So it's looking for the guidance of other people to
Yeah.
support and help it grow. Um, which is it's just an interesting idea that you can criticize someone's inferior, but as long as it's in the right way, it won't necessarily trigger something.
Like it's not like if you come up and give it feedback and suggest ways to improve, it'll listen. Like like
Right.
obviously if you go to someone and criticize them, they're not gonna want to listen. That's just basic like
Sure.
general human psychology. But it's when we talk about like if you're providing feedback in a constructive way,
Hmm.
helping the apprentice role, it'll eat that shit up. It'll
Right.
listen to you as much as it can and try to get as much as you can in terms of advice.
Right. Agreed.
So yeah, we talked about the characteristics. It's weak but highly valued, context specific, and activated in domains with repeated practice, sensitive to influence and feedback. And I think this is actually kind of the most crucial aspect because when we talk about the difference between a strength and a weakness, is that like you can be very good at your apprentice role, but if you're only practicing in specific domains, like you're not able to generalize the skill set that you learned in it.
Interesting.
So, for
Okay.
example, for example, like if I'm SE apprentice role, right? That's my SE. SE's in my apprentice slot. I can get good at SE's things if I'm only practicing the SE in a specific context and a specific
Right.
skill. But the moment you take me out the zone of familiarity,
Right.
it becomes garbage. But that's
So,
not the case when it comes to the stronger functions like the NI, the TE, the ego
mm,
block in general. It can easily generalize itself in other domains. I can easily apply NITE to other domains I've never come across in my life before.
right. Right. This is a good point because, like, I was talking about basketball earlier. That's a very specific domain of skill sets. But then going to like fixing a car or something, totally different, much more resistance there. Um, I relate a lot to that point about the general. I've always wondered why if I get really good at something, I can't just pivot into something that's like a little bit similar. It's like it's a whole new thing. It's a whole new thing for the SE inferior. So apprentice.
Yes. All right, now let's talk about the shadow block. The shadow block represents the hidden forces within your psyche, the strong but devalued parts of you that act as critics and challengers and protectors. Unlike the ego or the catalyst, this block does not aim to inspire or build up. Instead, it functions as a check on your blind spots. Now, the reason why this matters is because if you leave it ignored, the shadow can become like a nemesis, undermining your confidence, creating
Hmm.
self doubt, and dragging you towards negativity. So, like, I think in general, when you find somebody who is doubtful, and that's the personality trait that they've developed, is because they're a little more focused on the shadow. Their energy is not blocked,
Interesting.
right? So it's really like the concept behind Model S is, should I say, the assumption, right, is that your energy, your mental energy, is a fluid thing that is constantly moving up and down, and you can actually track it. So if you're going about your day and you're feeling a little bit more doubtful for some reasons because your energy's gone into the shadow block area, and then you can literally take exercises, practices that target specific cognitive roles in order to get you out of the shadow block and into the catalyst block or the ego block.
Okay.
You're starting to see like how the puzzle unfolds and how things
Th-
work.
This is very interesting here because you're claiming that each block is going to be have like home to a specific kind of energy, and
Hmm.
you could use that for many different things. But it sounds like one of the things you can do is also reverse engineer what you just said. If you come across someone who's very doubtful, self-critical, or just critical, there's a good chance they're in those functions relative to themselves to their type, um,
Yeah.
that they're operating from those two attitudes. So if you become skilled in understanding and reading people, you can theoretically reverse engineer this to understand exactly what functions they're stuck in potentially.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So because if I'm coming across somebody, right, and they're skeptical, doubtful, they're experiencing the overall emotional states that the shadow block is
Right,
responsible for, then all you have to do is just ask, okay, what are they being skeptical of? Like, what is it? Are
right,
they skeptical of their of TI information, of any of FI, of SI information? Like, what is it exactly? Then you can actually
right.
start to pinpoint exactly what it is that's causing them to be in that state of mind.
What's interesting for me in terms of looking at applications of this, any kind of therapeutic or like life coaching context, I could see how this would be very powerful. It takes a lot of skill, I would, but to be able to discern where someone is, if you know their type, and then you have an idea of what they may need to do to move to ascend, as you say, potentially extremely powerful in really any human context, but particularly like a therapeutic context.
And that exactly is the specific purpose of Model S. It's
Okay.
built and designed for that purpose right there. Is that you can use it on yourself. You can be like, okay, I noticed that like over the last couple of days I've been in this sort of state of mind.
Mhm.
Why am I in it? What does it mean? What level is that? Is that an abyss block? Is that a shadow block? Is that a catalyst block? Is that an ego? Like which float level am I at?
Right.
Do I want to be here? Yes or no? Or how can I move? And things like that. And
Right.
yeah, so it's like it's basically like a system for having mastery over your mind.
Right.
Is the best way I can put it. So let's talk about the shadow. So yeah, to continue, the shadow block is not about growth through active development, but about learning to listen to your inner critic without being consumed by them. It provides the tension needed to prevent arrogance and tunnel vision and self-sabotage. The function that this block serves for your self-development is that it reveals contradictions in your thinking and behavior, cognitive dissonance, and it checks the ego's impulses, warning you of risk that you may dismiss. So for self-growth, the shadow is less about strengthening and it's more about accepting its presence to integrate and redirect its energy to serve the ego block. The key is not fighting it, but using its insights without letting it dominate your identity.
Yeah. Interesting. One other thing there, I've mentioned this in some of the cognitive archetype videos, but in Greek mythology, hubris uh, was punished by the deity Nemesis. And it's so interesting, from a Jungian perspective, all these mythologies are psychological realities, was his idea. But you can see that played out in the blocks here too, of when that shadow block is ignored, it's going to create, you use the word nemesis and create that uncertainty, create that doubt. But when it's acknowledged, it can be a great teacher, particularly for those weak spots.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So let me break down the challenger and the sentinel role. The challenger role, the psychological concepts that it supplies is cognitive dissonance and adversarial growth. Now, I gotta reemphasize that these concepts that I'm mentioning, like cognitive dissonance, adversarial growth, receptivity to feedback, resilience, identity, all of those, I developed them from the academically peer-reviewed research papers. Now, I'm not going to
Mm,
go into the specific um, papers on this presentation, but I do have videos that talk about the exact studies. They use large sample size, longitudinal studies. It's been like tested multiple times
mm,
throughout decades. The how can I explain the benefits of them for your self growth. So these psychological concepts, I mentioned them in other videos in my playlist. You guys can check them out. But I just wanted to really emphasize that the most important aspect to the cognitive rule are the psychological concepts that it supplies.
yeah,
So the most important thing about the challenger rule is the cognitive dissonance and adversarial growth, because these are actual real life psychological phenomenons that have been tracked scientifically, right?
yeah.
It's not like if you go to any actual scientist in psychology, they'll tell you, okay, yeah, this is an actual tried, tested, studied concept in psychology.
Yeah.
So it's cognitive dissonance and adversarial growth. Now let's talk about the dichotomies of the challenger rule. The dichotomies help us understand the nature of the challenger role. The challenger role is cautious, as in it's subtle and situationally used based on context, but it's inert. It's a very stubborn, non-flexible um, position. It seeks to conform the environment to it rather than to conform to the environment. It's the area of challenge as well. The purpose is to observe potential pitfalls, limitation, and antithetical behavior both in oneself and in others to provide warnings or recommendation to navigate negative situations.
Mm,
It's strong, but it's often neglected function which operates in opposition to the ego. It's perceived as boring by the person who's using it. Like if you're trying to use your challenge role, you're going to say that it's boring, it's unnecessary. You might even be irritated by it, and it's adversarial. You feel like there's something like whenever you feel like you're internally opposing yourself, it's because there's something that the challenge role
mhm.
is trying to tell you, right? So now let me move on to the sentinel role. I hope I'm not moving too fast, but I
No,
just
this is good.
okay. So we got the psychological concepts that it supplies is defensive pessimism and constructive criticism. Again, these are tested, tried and true concepts in applied psychology. The dichotomies are is that it's bold, it's in your face, all right? This is the critic we're talking about here. It's in your face, you're gonna see it, but it's also flexible. It fluidly adapts and influences the environment. Its essence, it's the vigilant critic. It functions as a visible, outwardly critical pole, shaping both self-perception and interaction with others. It's strong. It's the strongest function that you have alongside your hero, your leading. It's the strongest one, but it's not valued. You know,
Okay.
so it's strong, flexible, evaluatory. It operates at a level of strength comparable to the leading role, often critical of oneself and others. It intervenes to maintain standards and prevent negative developments. Despite its power, the individual often prefers to shift attention towards the stronger valued aspect of personality rather than dwell on the function explicitly. Now, what I want to say as well, just a reference on cite Dario Nodi as well. He's also done some research on the critical and shows that it really pops up in people's behavior and personality in this
Mhm.
part. And I found that this is something very interesting. I think you and I, John, we were talking about this. Is that how Socionics agrees with it? John Beebe agrees with it.
Mhm.
Dr. Dario Nodi also agrees with it, which I think is pretty cool. So yeah, what questions you got?
Yeah, so just to react to that, we had talked about this a few times. In my own life, I've noticed I'm like, I feel like my critic is there all the time and always has something to say. And as I self-reported it as being like, I think this is pretty powerful. And it was very interesting for all these the researchers to come out with, hey, the critic is extremely powerful. And just because it's technically lower, um, it doesn't mean it's weaker. And I would agree that it's a top two or three powerful function. What's interesting here too, as we get into the shadow block, we see a reversal of the energies where um, the sentinel, the critic becomes the bold one, and then
Yeah,
the nemesis, the cautious one. But then there's another switch here where we see bold and flexible at the same time for the first time,
yeah,
I think, and then a cautious but stubborn, which is an interesting new combination because it's hard to describe the nemesis because it's unpleasant, but um, but it's not exactly bold. It's preventative, but it's stubborn about being preventative. Um, so
yeah.
I just like that it's a unique energy as you're describing it.
Now, now the cool thing is that what you'll notice is that if you're an introvert, all your introverted functions are bold. If you're an extrovert, all your extroverted functions are bold.
Right. Yes.
Right?
This
So,
is this is great. Yeah.
so you're an INFJ. Your FI is going to be bold. Your TI is going to be bold. Your NI is going to be bold. Your SI is going to be bold. But your FE is going to be cautious. Your NE is going to be cautious. Now, if you compare yourself to an ENFJ, their NE is going to be bold. You're going to see
Hmm.
their NE. You'll see the NE of an ENFJ before you see the NE of an INFJ.
Hmm.
Right?
Sure.
You'll see the introverted feeling of an INFJ, your type, before you see the introverted feeling of an ENFJ, because ENFJs are very cautious and subtle with their use of FI, while the INFJ is a little bit more bold but also flexible.
Yeah. So if I can pull an example here, I recently did a video about Ronaldo. I typed him as an ESTP, and many people typed him as INFJ. You made the argument though that he can't be. He's unlikely to be an extrovert because you perceive boldness in his TI and NI, and if that's true,
Yeah,
then he'd have to be an ISTP or an INFJ because of the introvert bold functions. That's
yeah,
I think that's okay. That's very interesting, um, and it makes sense that the boldness would follow our polarity towards extroversion or introversion because that's where our energy pole is, um, all the way down. So
right. So now let's move to the last block, which is called the abyss block. This represents the darkest and the weakest layers of the psyche, the parts of yourself that feel foreign, exhausting, and vulnerable. Unlike the ego or the catalyst, which energize and inspire, the abyss is where you feel drained, misunderstood, and easily undermined. Why it matters is because you can build your life in the is that you cannot build your life in the abyss. It is not an area of growth, but of risk management. The saboteur and the conformer show you the traps that can derail your confidence, drain your energy, or pull you into despair. Success here is not about becoming strong in these areas, but about mitigating their influence and protecting your higher blocks, your ego and your catalyst. When respected, the abyss becomes a warning system. When ignored, it becomes a sinkhole. The function that this block serves for your self development is that it helps you recognize where you are easily manipulated or sabotaged, accepting that not every part of you must be developed, some must simply be managed.
Mm,
Using your valued functions like your ego and your catalyst to shield and redirect energy away from these weak zones, and that learning humility, patience, and awareness of your limits. So, this is what the abyss block teaches right here. Now, let's take a look at the two cognitive roles in this block. We got the saboteur role, and then we got the conformist role. The saboteur role, the psychological concept that it provides is psychological reactance and neglect avoidance bias. It is the dichotomies is that this is cautious, all right? You're cautious with your saboteur role, subtle, situational, but it's stubborn, right? You are you insist on not using it. You insist that like anytime you try to get an INTP to use extroverted sensing, they are going to be hard headed in making sure that you do not get them to use extroverted sensing no matter what. You know what I'm saying? INTJ,
interesting.
same thing with their FE. Um, INFJ, your type with your TE. That's really how it works when we talk about the saboteur role. It's
Can
the
you give
illusion.
like just one
Yeah,
one more example there? I'm like almost there, but I don't quite see it how it's
I
bold or
ISTP.
stubborn rather.
Oh, okay, you don't stubborn. So, for example, you go to an ISTP. They got any saboteur. Ask them to brainstorm. You're now going to get an ISTP or ISFP to start brainstorming and generating different ideas
I see.
and using extroverted intuition to say,
Okay.
oh, it could be this way, it could be that way. They're going to insist on you on not using that cognitive role.
Okay. Interesting. I see.
Why? Why is that the case? Because not only is it stubborn, but it's also cautious. They're trying to be very careful. They feel like this could be an area where somebody could mess up or they could sabotage themselves, and so they don't want to do it. In the case, for example, of an INTJ, why do you? So the reason why INTJs with FE saboteur can come off so emotionally reserved is because they know the dangers of externally expressing emotions consistently. They're cautious with their use of FE, and stubborn. They insist on not using it.
Okay.
They insist on not necessarily having to put on a show or to come across well or to make other people feel good about them because they feel like
Interesting.
it could be used to manipulate them or it could be dangerous somehow.
Fair. Fair enough. Interesting.
Now, let me talk about the purpose. Now, where one is most weak, neglected, and prone to error, it reflects areas of vulnerability, misunderstanding, and personal challenge, often evoking discomfort, uncertainty, and anxiety. This, engaging with it, offers high development page. Disengaging with it. And then characteristics are that it's inert, cautious, and evaluatory. It's resistant to information, particularly when it conflicts with past experience. This is basically what we talked about. They insist on having it switched off.
Yeah.
So now let's talk about the conformist role. Now, I think the biggest, now, up until now, we realize that there are a lot of actually parallels between Model S and John Beebe system, and I think that's a good thing. But I think one thing that Model S heavily deviates away from the John Beebe is when it comes to the demon function, right? We call it the conformist role. Now, the concept of it is to provide social conformity and impression management. The dichotomies is that the conformist role is bold, it's also going to be in your face when used, and flexible. So unlike the saboteur, it can actually be used. Like an INFJ can actually use a little bit of SI, but they can't use TE. And I think that's why you get sometimes how people sometimes use their demon function,
Mm-hmm.
but you never really see them use their trickster.
Okay.
Why? Because the conformist role, its purpose is to enable the individual to fit into social structures, norms, and expectations. It allows for conformity and coordination with others. It's basically the area where it's like, okay, I don't want to do this, I don't like doing it, but I see that the environment, that the society that I'm in, the people that I'm in, surrounded by, they're pushing me to use it, so fine, I'll use it as little as possible, but then don't bother me with it anymore. That's sort of like the attitude of the conformist world. That's why you can get, for example, you can get like an ENTJ who will use extroverted feeling in a work environment. You
Right.
know, you've ever seen those
Mhm.
ETJs use extroverted feeling? And
I
it's like,
have.
why are you using how like you're thinking to yourself, how are you using FE on a thought for this particular business event or whatever? They're
Yeah.
using it because they understand that they have to put at least a bare minimum in terms of how they
Mhm.
use it. When you take a look at the INJs, that'd be INTJ, INFJ, our types, we don't use SI, but we understand that hey, we have a body we have to take care of. Use the bare minimum and just keep it moving from
Right.
there. So
Interesting.
that's really how, yeah.
There's a lot of interesting stuff here. Let me go backwards. The first thing you had said here that was really fascinating to me is that this block, this is the abyss block, right? Not the shadow block.
Oh yeah, it is the best. That should be
Okay.
the best.
So
Thanks
the
for pointing that out.
this is the abyss. The first thing that was really interesting to me is that you said that this block, the demon trickster, is not really about growth and optimization, which has been a vision that's been spread, but it's about, hey, you're not going to be like expert at this, but let's cut down on the destruction it's going to cause.
Yeah, risk management.
Very interesting. Risk management. It's very interesting because it's kind of a sobering claim that your demon is not going to become some great hero. Your trickster is not going to become some very precise, cautious parent or anything like that. What is my question for that though is, um, what's the difference? Is there a difference between developing these functions to get somewhat competent at them versus developing them to manage the risk?
So when we talk about competence, when you say the word competence, I think like for example, you leading the way or influencing the environment with the abyss block,
Okay.
or letting people know you for your usage of the abyss block. That's never gonna happen.
Okay.
The abyss block really is just there to undermine, to destroy, and it's absolutely negative. And the reason why is because it's your weakest block, but it's also one you don't value. So what happens when you're forced to do something that you're not good at and you don't even like?
Hmm.
There's no circumstance where there's a positive relationship that you're going to have to that,
Okay.
or some sort of positive interaction when you're doing something that you're not good at that other people are good at but you yourself don't value.
Right.
So what it's really all about is about using your stronger blocks, for example your ego, to mitigate against any negativity from the abyss. Right. So, for example, like if I had to use myself as an example, I'm strong at NINTE. I cannot do FE and SI. But what I can do is I can develop NI long-term strategies with TE schedules to mitigate the negative effects of bad SI health or of coming
Oh,
across or
I,
coming across bad in an FE social sort of way. I can develop a system with my NITE to help cover those weak areas. You know what I'm saying?
I see. Okay. That's that makes more sense to me now. That is really a mastery over your strengths is going to create a safeguard against your greatest weaknesses.
Absolutely.
That's very interesting. Okay, so for example, PE users, they can learn the rules, so to speak, of social charm, of social interaction. A lot of TE users are very charming, actually. It's a different
Yeah.
kind of social interaction. It's different, but it still can cover the social sphere. Um, I'll have to think about that for a while. That's a very interesting idea. I think that might be right. Um, the other thing here that really struck me is just the label going from demon to conformist is like such a change in how we might look at it. It's like just totally different. So I'm curious what led you to identify such a stark change in the demon that you felt conformist was actually a better captured its essence.
All right, so this view mostly originates from the classical socionics,
Okay.
right? This view stems more from the socionics, Astra Augusta, Model A sort of worldview or mindset when it comes to looking at the demon. Is that even in socionics, there people say that it's the area of you just adapting to your environment and you conforming to the environment. Now, I labeled it the conformist as opposed, right? I just decided to call it the conformist instead of they call it the role function. I decided I don't like the name, so I changed it to conformist because that's what people use because it's something that you conform to, and it's just like, all right, fine, I'll do it,
Yeah.
and then you go on about your day. So, and the name demon on itself, I felt like it was a little bit too dramatic
Hmm. Sure.
because because you you if we're gonna call it the demon, it needs to be the weakest function. It needs to be something that is inherently evil for you and others. But when you look at people's use of the demon function, it's not always like that.
Mhm.
Like so, let me take it back to the ETJs. ETJs don't necessarily use extroverted feeling in evil, malicious ways. So it doesn't really make any sense to call it a demon function
Yeah.
or to call it anything else really because they use it quite well. No, I won't say well, but they use it when they need to.
Sure.
They don't avoid, like the ENTJ does not avoid using FE the way that they're going to avoid using SI.
Yeah.
So it had to, so of course, just from that logic alone, there has to be some sort of usage of it. There has to be a better name for
Yeah.
this specific cognitive role.
So, what do you think compels someone to use their conformist role then? Is it just social pressure? Is it just the group situation, or is it something else internally? Do you think?
I would say it's just social pressure. That's it.
Okay.
There's no there's no reason to believe that somebody will be internally motivated to use their conformist role when
Right.
it's not valued because it's
Right.
devalued. And let me take it back. Let me go back to the original diagram because I think I want to go back to what I mentioned about the quadras. Because when we look at quadras, it's all about what people value. And if you look at the model diagram in the middle here, the leading role, supportive role, ignition role, apprentice role, that makes up your four functions that determine
Hmm.
your quadra. So you're in the beta quadra. You've got Ni, Fe, Ti, Se. Those are what you value. Now,
Okay.
what's your opposite quadrant? Your opposite
Hmm.
quadrant is the delta
The
quadrant,
delta quadrant. Yeah.
and those are the functions that you do not value, as in you do not like to use.
Right. So, I'm wondering if I should go here or not. Mm. Uh, I'll ask it generally, and if it doesn't go anywhere, that's fine. I'm still struggling to articulate it. I believe I'm very developed into my NEFI side over my TI side. So much so that I like live in that, I think, and I suspect you might be similar, relatively. But I like how do I explain this? I know I have more joy when I use SETI more, but I like don't trust it. I don't trust it to take care of reality. I trust, and I've been tested with my NE and FI more, and I've had to use those to get through situations. Um, I don't know if you can. I'm struggling to make that into a question. I know there's a question there, but maybe you can just react to that if you have thoughts about development or using these less valued functions, but I still I feel more comfortable using them, maybe because I've had to, but I don't know. Is there something there that you see that you want to react to or
I
um,
mean, I'd say it's more because you had to than you wanted to,
uh,
and you said it. You said that you felt like you had to, which
right,
is key.
right.
You had to. Why? So think about this one. Why did you have to use your shadow block, your NEFI, which is stronger than your SETI? Why? Because it's stronger. Because it's
Right.
help. It makes it easier for you to survive in the world when you're using all of your strengths.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting. I'm making the argument in my series on the needs of the 16 types that certain conditions kind of have to be in place for someone to want to use their inferior function because it's so vulnerable, even though it's exciting. I think it's less so with the nemesis and the critic is that they can just default to using that if reality requires it.
Yeah,
Um,
it, it is, and another thing that contributes to that is you're an NF, right?
right.
That's your temperament. What's one thing that you're going to notice about the NFs? Like, what do you think do they all share in common with each other?
The first thing that comes to mind is just an interest in humanity's future and humanity's growth, relationships,
Right.
things like that.
All right. So let me bring it back. Let's go here. Let's go here. Back to the diagram. So we talked about the leading role and the supportive role are the strongest.
Right.
The challenger role and the sentinel role are also the strongest. These are the two strongest blocks, your ego and your shadow.
Hmm.
With the leading role and the sentinel role being your two, the hero and the critic being your strongest functions.
Okay.
These are the ones that you're strong in.
Right.
You are an NF, which means that you're strong in intuition and feeling.
Right.
Like
Across the board.
NI
Okay.
across the board.
Okay.
NI plus FE, but also NE plus FI. And that's why you're an NF.
That's very interesting. So
And
temperament is strength across the board. These four functions. What emerges from that
yeah,
is temperament or something like it.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
very interesting. Okay. Okay.
It's your strength.
That makes
Because
sense. Yeah.
if you're gonna be an NF, you'd have to like be pretty strong at the NI, at the intuition and feeling.
Yeah.
All aspects of intuition and feeling.
Interesting.
Right. So
Okay.
it makes so it makes more sense that you would default to that when you need it.
Right.
If we're talking about from a survival standpoint.
Right. It's interesting too. I'm just seeing, at least with my own type, um, with the child inferior block, the catalyst block. It's artisan related, and then the bottom one is guardian related, SITTE. So there's little sprinkles here of other temperaments that come out maybe situationally, but I wonder if that pattern exists for everyone. Maybe not. But that there's so much sensing and so much intuition and so much feeling with the strengths. It's interesting though if you get into like an ESTP, their other strength is guardian related, SITE, and this is one of the reasons I've wondered if the temperaments have taken a wrong turn with some of the categorizations. Um, because of that. So just as a side note.
Okay.
Okay. So is that anything? That's the end of your presentation.
I mean, yeah, to learn more about Model S, the science behind it, you can just check out my channel. I have videos on my playlist titled Socionics Model S. That's where I cite the actual studies, the
Sure.
academic peer-reviewed research and all that. And that's about it for the presentation. But I'd love
Great.
to have a discussion
Thank you so
about.
much. Yeah, that was awesome. I love the structure here. You've pulled from some fundamentals from other systems and then applied your own observations and your own kind of systematic integrity to it. Um, a lot to digest. I don't know if I have any immediate questions other than the ones I've asked, but I think what I mentioned briefly about Ronaldo, for example, I think applying this to typing people is very interesting too. If you can identify, if this is true, then you can identify potentially the boldness as related to certain functions and things like that. So that with this system, it feels like, well, that it could apply across the board, obviously. So I find that very interesting. Yeah, I'm curious to see what you guys think. Leave a comment down below with your insights or questions, and Solomon. Of course, you can respond to them too if you wish. So I think we'll wrap up there. I need to process some of this. This was very interesting. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for giving us the presentation. And yeah, maybe we'll talk more in the future. So anything else you want to say before we wrap up here?
No, that's really about it, man. That's yeah.
All right. Well, thanks guys, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
All right, see you.